Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has unveiled new measures to combat global warming. He was flanked by several senior ministers as he described the $15.2 billion plan. It will see an increase in the carbon tax over the next decade and more environmental funding. Here's some of the announcement.
Our plan will improve the energy efficiency of homes and buildings to cut energy waste while also helping people cut down on their bills. It will support sustainable food and farming practices. And it will make clean power available across the country, including in remote and Indigenous communities, while investing in clean and affordable transportation, including public transit and zero-emission vehicles. Come January, I look forward to announcing our plan for permanent public transit funding. This plan is about what we can do for families, workers, and industry. Starting in 2023, we will put even more money in the pockets of Canadians by increasing the price on pollution by $15 a tonne per year. At the same time, we will help businesses create and export low-carbon, made-in-Canada products, services, and technologies.
The CBC's Evan Dyer is following the story. He joins me now from Chelsea, Quebec. So, Evan, some call it the carbon tax, some the price on pollution. Either way, it's going up. So let's start there. Can you tell us, what's changing on that front?
Sure. So, we just heard Prime Minister Justin Trudeau there talking about the increase per year now being $15 a tonne. So we've been on a track for a while since the carbon tax came into existence, where it started out at $10 a tonne, as many people remember, then increased by $10 a year, with the last programmed increase being to take it to $50 in 2022. But now we're seeing a horizon beyond that, going to 2030. So not only will that increase be extended out by another 8 years, but it will also become faster. Instead of going up $10 a year, the carbon tax is now going to increase $15 a year. So by the year 2030, which is the end point, and it's one of the yardsticks, the targets, if you like, explicitly mentioned in the Paris Agreement, by 2030, you're going to see $170 a tonne carbon tax effectively across the country. Of course, the federal government only imposes it on those provinces that aren't able to come up with an alternative scheme of their own that the federal government judges to be equivalent. So currently, those provinces are Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. Of course, there's also a rebate. This is the argument that the Liberals have struggled to make with the carbon tax, that it's not just a tax, it's also a rebate, it's revenue neutral. 90% of the money that is collected flows back to households. And perhaps that argument hasn't been that effective because people pay the tax all year long and then get one check at the end of the year. So the Liberals are going to fix that, and this is perhaps more of a political adjustment than an environmental one. Instead of that one yearly rebate check, there will now be quarterly checks. So the Canadian taxpayer who lives in those provinces will see a check 4 times as often to remind them that money under the carbon tax does flow back to people as well. And I think the government is hoping that will make it a little bit more palatable.
How does this bring us closer to our targets, and how does it leave us compared to other countries?
Well, I think we first of all have to start out by saying that compared to other countries, Canada is definitely bringing up the rear on climate change, has not made progress over past years compared to other countries. If you look at, for example, the benchmark of trying to bring our emissions to 30% below 2006, we haven't achieved any of that. Canada's emissions are still stuck virtually exactly where they were in 2006. While other countries have cut them much more significantly. In the U.S., you see, almost a 20% cut since 2006, and you see much more significant cuts in some parts of the country, like of the world, rather, like the U.K. Now it actually emits less carbon than it did in the year 1894, if you can believe that, by having eliminated coal from its system. So Canada is coming from behind, but does say that with these changes, it will be able to meet that target by 2030 of 511 megatons and actually exceed it somewhat. So perhaps get 30 megatons beyond that. But all of these changes have to happen in the future because they haven't happened in the past. That's true both of the Harper government and of the Trudeau government, which has presided over an actual increase in emissions as far as we know, although we don't have the latest figures for 2019 and 2020. But what we do know is that during the years where we do have measurements, the Justin Trudeau administration has presided over an increase in emissions in Canada.
Evan, thank you. The CBC's Evan Dyer in Chelsea, Quebec. Let's look at today's announcement from a couple of perspectives in Calgary. I want to welcome Jason Ribeiro. He is the Director of Strategy for Calgary Economic Development. And in Ottawa, Catherine Abreu is Executive Director for Climate Action Network Canada. Hello to you both, and thank you. Catherine, I'll start with you. What is your assessment of the plan?
Well, I think with this plan today, we finally see Canada enter into the countries representing over 50% of global GDP that acknowledge strong economic policy is inseparable from strong environmental policy. There is a burgeoning $26 trillion low carbon economy that is taking over global markets. And so far, Canadians and Canadian communities have been slow to be able to join that economy. And I think this plan outlines some real measures that will take Canada forward into this new clean economy. When it comes to the numbers associated with this plan, so we see a $15 billion investment in climate action, a promise to exceed our existing 2030 target to reduce emissions 40% below 2005 levels by 2030. It's good to see those steps. However, those numbers really pale in comparison to some of the numbers that we're seeing in other jurisdictions, including some of our closest trading partners. So those are going to have to increase, and provinces and territories are going to be a really critical part of making sure those numbers increase.
Jason, from your perspective, what stood out to you?
I would agree with a lot of what was just said. A healthy environment and a healthy economy go hand in hand. And while this might seem like news to many of the viewers nationally, Calgarians and Albertans don't like floods in their downtown, which is the driver of our economy. They don't like wildfires in Fort Mac. And so the need for climate action is real and also experienced on the ground here in Alberta. And, some of the measures here are quite interestingly things that Calgary and Alberta have led on. You talk about the electrification of public transit being a core measure of this plan. Our C-Train downtown was one of the first in North America to be powered 100% by wind power and renewables. We have a burgeoning, globally recognized top 5 clean tech ecosystem. And so I think there's a lot of good that comes out of this plan. What I would push back on is that I don't see targets. And I saw a lot of the questions aimed at both the minister and the prime minister around, well, what are the targets? Why aren't you announcing them today? So we don't actually know what that's going to look like. But I will say as well, where it concerns industrial emitters, there is not a lot of daylight between what the province in Alberta has done here and what the federal government is proposing. How they're going to level set on that, I don't know. But Alberta already has one of the most punitive industrial emitter measures in the country. And the tier funding that comes from that is supporting the clean tech innovation ecosystem building here. So I think there are more targets to be announced and certainly more information to be provided before I think you hear a lot from Calgary and Alberta.
Well, Catherine, let's talk about targets, because Canada notoriously misses targets time after time after time. So what do you think about this plan with regard to targets?
Yeah, that's right. It seems like Canada's never met a target we couldn't miss. We've been setting them since the early 1990s and haven't met a single one. However, I think today's like an interesting moment in the history of Canada's action on climate change, because instead of coming to the table with just a new target that we might then just miss, this is actually a proposal from the federal government for how we might exceed our existing 2030 target using exclusively federal levers. So they're saying if we only pull the levers that we have at our disposal as the federal government, we think we can go 10% beyond our existing Paris pledge. So that's that 40% number. It's 10% greater than the existing 30% goal that we have in our Paris Agreement pledge. But they're also saying we could do more if the provinces and territories come to the table with us and put some of their own effort into the mix. And that's part of this negotiation that Minister Wilkinson and PM Trudeau mentioned at this morning's presser, that over the next few months, they'll be talking with provinces and territories and Indigenous leaders and thinking about how that new target can be even greater than the 40% that they've outlined today. But it's true, we need that target because we've made the promise to the UN that we are going to be increasing our target target, and we have to do that in time for the next UN climate negotiations in 2021.
Jason, the carbon tax on fuels is being increased up significantly from where it is now. Will that be a tough sell in Alberta? And did you find it interesting that rather than one rebate check, there will be 4 per year, almost to kind of remind people, hey, this is revenue neutral. You're getting, and Albertans could actually get a check that's even higher than people in other provinces that don't produce oil and gas.
Yeah, the heavy emitter provinces are going to get some of the largest checks. Whether that translates politically to a win has yet to be seen. We don't have a great history in terms of trying to sell people on carbon pricing at an individual level, at the pump, at a consumer level when people are heating their homes. And so that to me is more of a political question rather than a policy, how that's going to shake out. It also deserves to be mentioned that there is a federal court case with the provinces around the jurisdiction to be able to implement some of that carbon pricing. And so I think that we're in the early days of figuring out where that all stands. But I think as it concerns people, which I think is the most important part here, what does this mean for people? I think what we really need to get a lot more detail on is what these measures are going to do for someone working in the energy sector in oil and gas. Today it was announced that Inter Pipeline Limited is pledging $1 billion to finish a petrochemical plant in 2021 and into 2022 for liquefied natural gas. Like that is going to provide jobs and real opportunities for, again, a city facing an 11% unemployment rate. And so I agree with Catherine's comments that the measures and the framework is certainly ambitious, certainly a sort of watershed moment, but distilling how it's going to impact ordinary Albertans, ordinary Calgarians who are potentially out of work is going to be the selling point. And I don't think politically it can just be about, the checks in the mail and the prices are going to be increasing at the pump. I think we really need more details on reskilling, innovation, and those kinds of measures.
Catherine, just final word to you. Do you think that this is a plan that is serious, with teeth, that will help at the end of the day combat climate change?
This is a serious plan that will help and that needs a whole lot more information to give it the teeth to really combat climate change and get that economic transformation that my colleague was speaking about to make sure that Canadians have prosperity and jobs well into the future. I think it's also a good mix of carrots and sticks. And so we not only have to look at some of the measures, but what comes along with them. So we're getting a price in carbon, but we're also getting incentives to help people buy electric vehicles, use public transportation, use active transportation. And so it's really that holistic picture that we need to be taking a look at. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what the provinces and territories have to say and how they'll be collaborating with the feds on this.
All right. Thank you both very much. In Calgary, Jason Ribeiro, and in Ottawa, Catherine Abreu.